Hello, peoples, and welcome to Esoterica Cinema, the program where we take films from the cinematic multiverse and discuss the hell out of them. My name is Jason Peters, and with me, as always, is the man who in his personal tool shed houses a rambunctious young alien named Mac, Mr. Ryan Siebold.
What's up, Jason? How's it going, buddy?
It's going well. And also worth noting, I have seen the alien. Does kind of look like a cheap knockoff of E.T. Has anyone ever told you this? Have you heard this?
He eats Skittles. Yeah, lots of Skittles. I leave trails for it to my back tool shed. Yeah, that's how we harness the little bastard. But he's doing well. Pay no attention to that situation. We got all that under control.
If you hear whistling, just go on by. But we're not here to discuss Ryan's alien. No, we're here to discuss other aliens of the traditional little green kind in a movie called No One Will Save You that's been getting a lot of buzz on Hulu. Ryan, do you have a description for our audience?
I do. In what is perhaps one of the more perplexing movie titles, I know you and I were going back and forth. No one will save you. Nobody will help you in this
you
situation.
You will survive. You're on your own.
Yeah.
A woman locks alone at midnight. No wait.
They should have. Yeah. Whatever. No, I think it's No One Will Save You. And Google
No One Will Save You. That's the one.
No One Will Save You. Google has this described as. Bryn, played by Caitlin Dever, finds solace within the walls of the home where she grew up until she's awakened one night by strange noises from unearthly intruders. This is from 2023. Like you just said, this just came out. And directed by Brian Duffield, who has done a lot of stuff, some of which you may have heard of, some of which you may have seen. Things like Love and Monsters and Spontaneous. He's made a lot of stuff, but nothing really that has gotten this level of attention. I think this is getting probably the most attention so far. This was made on a budget of $23 million, and it was shot by a guy named Aaron Morton, who we've discussed on this very show. He shot things like Fede Alvarez's Evil Dead from back in 2013. So, he did some Black Mirror episodes and stuff like that. I thought he did a great job. We're going to have a lot to say about that. But before we get into it, Jason, I have to ask you, as always, my friend, what did you think about this movie?
Ryan, going to be happy to talk about this. First, do want to remind our audience to go ahead and like this video and subscribe to the channel, as well as we talk about this movie along the way. If anything comes to you, feel free to leave those ideas in the comments section. We would love to hear what you have to say about any of these moments, any of the things we're talking about, and the movie itself. So, Ryan, let me answer your question directly and let you know that I found this movie to be, shall we say, acceptable? Is that
okay? That's fair.
This is one of those movies that was indeed a movie, and I did indeed watch it, and it was a thing. We've talked about this before, right? I think this film has elements that work. I think it is a pretty ballsy take on the material. I understand why it's getting the attention that it does, but there's also a lot that doesn't work about this film. Structurally, it's very unorthodox, and I don't know that it necessarily works. We could talk about that a little bit. And I think that, Ryan, you're a comedy guy. We're both comedy guys. Have you heard the expression "a hat on a hat"?
Oh, I use that all the time. Hat on a
hat. That was kind of, when I was really thinking about what didn't work for me for this film, I think it was that, right? I think that there's like a really just solid traditional sci-fi horror invasion movie here. And I do think that while I appreciate the artistry and the challenge of saying, hey, we're going to have a film that's no dialogue, which by the way, did you know going in that this film did not have dialogue?
Okay, let's talk about this. I knew nothing about this movie. I had not watched the trailer. I barely knew there were aliens in it. I knew that it was kind of a thriller and it was on Hulu and it was getting a lot of buzz. And I said, sure.
Yeah,
and
I'm a Stephen King fan.
Caitlin
he was
Dever
talking about it, so I was like willing to check it out. And then it was also one of those movies. I don't know if you had the same thing, but there's these certain movies where someone brings it up and you're like, oh no, I've never seen that, and then across the next 5 days, just as many people ask you about it, and you're like, okay, well, I guess I need to watch this movie. A week ago, I had never heard of it, but 5 people just asked me about it back to back. So
that was
this
both
film for me.
Barbarian and was it Malignant? I think both of those were that movie for me. And this kind of had like similar vibes. Like you could tell
Yeah.
This was a really good straight-to-video movie or a really shitty theater movie, but probably it lives somewhere in between those realms. I don't know, but I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was really good. I had a lot of fun.
That's cool. A lot of people did, so I know I'm kind of in the minority here of not super digging it.
I think maybe you and I are going to have different issues with the movie because I took issues with it. It's not perfect, but I had a lot of fun, and I was, it built the suspense where it was supposed to. I had anxiety when I was supposed to. It was creepy, and it was a fun take on an otherwise pretty tired and stale premise. I think that also it should have gotten old a lot quicker than it did. It stuck around a little too long in some scenes and kind of dragged a little bit, even in the more intense moments. Like there were some moments where it's like, run. What are we doing here? And so, from a realism standpoint or a suspension of disbelief standpoint, if you will, I think there were moments that it kind of lost me on that front. Maybe, but we'll get into all of that shortly. I think overall, though, as a whole, I had a lot of fun. It also was only an hour and a half, which is Ryan's sweet spot, baby.
Go figure. Ryan likes the 90-minute film.
Boom! Yeah, we're in.
Can't imagine why.
Hey, we're going places. We're in UFOs. We're all over town. Hour and a half, 90 minutes. Not wasting any time here.
Ryan loves a short movie. By the way, worth explaining just for anybody that doesn't know what hat on a hat means, because I realized that there may be people watching where they're like, maybe you two jerks know, but I have no idea what you just said. So that's the idea that you can sort of have two very well-developed ideas that work individually, and there's enough meat on the bone for them to work individually, but then you sort of outsmart yourself and say, hey, let me stack these two things together, and it just becomes a bit much, So it's like, in my opinion, if you've got sort of dialogue-free drama, that's one hat, and you've got sci-fi horror invasion film, that's another hat. Instead of just putting one of them on, you decide to stack the other one on top of it, right? So that's where the expression comes from. Whether you agree with that or not, you can obviously let us know in the comment section right now. But that's what we mean when we say that, just to clarify.
That's right. As you'll see described here, I am wearing headphones on some headphones. So if this is a good idea and it's acting totally functionally, this is extraneous and totally not necessary. So there's your physical, In this case, Jason, what would my first set of headphones that are functioning be in your analogy? Let's go ahead and go through this real quick since we're into the meat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the same thing I just did. One set of functioning headphones is, wordless drama.
Okay.
And had,
wordless drama.
The stuff with her
and that worked
sister
for you.
And the parents and stuff. And not necessarily. No, actually it didn't. But it's because again, it's on top of this other hat over here, which is sci-fi horror invasion film. And I think that if you had given me one or the other, it would have worked better than the two of them coming together, right? I do think there was the DNA for a strong, very silent sort of family drama. I think there was also the DNA for a solid sci-fi horror invasion film. But in my opinion, it's like fusion food, right? Sometimes it works for people and sometimes it doesn't. And in my opinion, they were just ingredients that didn't necessarily jive together. And so let's go ahead and get into
So this was not a Mexican pizza. Where you get the best of the Mexican, but then also the pizza,
Correct. Yeah. No, this was like an M&M cheeseburger. Oh no, I don't want that at all.
Not at all. Yeah. Okay.
But let's start with the obvious conceit. So obviously, like I said, there's no dialogue throughout the film. I would imagine by now with the film being as widely watched as it is, that's been discussed, and it's probably a known entity at this point.
It's out there.
Yeah, but I'll just, before I even discuss my issues, just let me say, did that aspect of it work for you, and why?
Yes, it did work for me. And mostly because the aliens, they have their own language, so they are communicating in a way with each other. And so you get that attachment of them kind of, communicating with each other. But then with Caitlin Deaver's character, she is totally isolated. And so she doesn't have anyone to really talk with anyways, unless she's talking with herself. I think that it's a little ham-fisted. I'm not going to say this is the best decision ever, but I don't think it's broken. I don't think it wrecks the movie. I'm not in this discussion with you to say, it was so cool how nobody fucking talked for 90 minutes. But I will say that it didn't take me out of it because she's by herself. She's all alone. The movie title itself, I mean, in its theme, overarching, is no one will save you. So it's a total, motif of self-reliance. So
that's fair.
Unless she's going to like swear to herself or be like, are you kidding me? Or something like that. And kind of like scream at the sky or, hell no. I think that's, she's by herself the whole time. And so she's also, it really plays with the themes of anxiety and loneliness and depression as she's going through it with the grief of her lost friend that she... accidentally grabbed a rock and murdered. That if I had any problems with, let's go. Let's get into this. Sorry, my bad.
Let me go ahead also and correct you because this is one of the things. This is one of the issues that I think stems from a film like this where you're going to do this. That's not her friend. It's not her friend. It's her sister.
No, it's her friend.
It's her sister. I thought it was her sister, and that's the entire reason that like the parents are like upset with her because
that's
like,
her parents. Because when she was writing the letter, it says, "I saw your parents today." Blah blah blah, and they have shunned her. Her best friends. And
I remember that. I thought those were her like own parents, and I was like, "Wow, they're being really cold to their own daughter." But that actually does make like more sense that they would spit in her face. I was like, "Jesus, what was this girl like beforehand?"
It shows her mom. So first off, remember she goes to her mom's gravesite in the very beginning and like leans against her tombstone.
I thought that was her sister's grave. See, and that's the thing. When I first saw it, I was like, "Oh, it's her mom's gravesite." But then there's like literally a scene just after that where she's again sitting at a grave. And with more information, I saw that the grave was her sister. And so I said, I must have overlooked that the first time around because like I didn't have enough information and just assumed it was the mom because, films do that, right?
And so I have in my notes right here, I have no clue what is happening. And so that, by and large, is one of my big problems with the film. I know it's meant to be disorienting. I know that they give like, they're just dribbling out the info for a payoff at the end. I don't think the payoff warrants that. I think if they would have just let you know, hey, this girl killed her best friend. She's going through some grief. But it's dribbling out these bits of info, by the way, with no dialogue. So you just have to pick it up visually as you're going along, these little visual cues. And case in point, here we are. And you're like still sussing it together as we're having this film discussion on camera. And, you still haven't quite gotten there. So I don't fault you for that at all. I think therein lies the flaws of no dialogue because you have no exposition dumps other than visual. And so you're left to kind of pick up these pieces as she's miming her way through it. But yes, she leans against her mother's gravestone in the beginning. That's her mom. They show her in flashbacks, putting together the little town with those miniature houses and stuff. That's why she still collects those in the beginning, like the little Etsy houses or whatever you want to call them. And, but then she killed, so her mom passed away and then she kills her best friend with a rock. On accident in like a play fight, which, hey, kids will be kids. And, and then, her best friend's parents, her dad is like the police chief. And then the mom, we see later spitting on her in the police station and stuff like that. So, that's all, her grief that she's dealing with. She's lost she's obviously, dealing with anxiety and depression and grief and all of these things and has become a recluse. She's also being shunned by the town she lives in, which she should probably move. But here she is in her mother's old house that she resides in that I'm sure she inherited outside of town. And she's just a recluse on the run that gets a little visit by some aliens.
Yeah, definitely. Can I also ask you before we continue, how old is this girl? Because I thought she was like 17 until she like bust out a bottle of wine. And then I'm like, is she underage drinking or is she like 22? I know Caitlin Dever just is one of those people that looks very young. That's why they cast her in Booksmart, which we looked at earlier. So they could, she was an adult, able to do some things on film that she wouldn't have been able to and still look very young. But like,
she's 26, I think, in real life. So I would give this 22, 23 in the movie.
Yeah, definitely. So that was kind of, and so there are also things about it where it's like, so, and By the way, I would be willing to discuss that final moment with you because it didn't really seem to me like it was a play fight.
Real quick, disclaimer for everybody. We're going to spoil the crap out of this movie.
We've already spoiled it. This disclaimer is like 3 minutes to 5
I'll edit
minutes.
this in.
Way too late, bro.
I'm going to splice it in. Boop. We're going to let it just like.
With the magic of AI.
Yeah, we're going to cut it in. Cut, edit, and go. Disclaimer. We're going to spoil the crap out of this movie, so beware if you haven't seen this movie, or go see it and then come back. There you go.
Yeah,
go
because
ahead,
because I do think it colors the experience overall. You know, I think that again, part of it is understanding all of like what's going on, but also the way that I saw the ending is I feel like the Caitlin Dever character, which again, you'd be forgiven for not knowing her name is Bryn because nobody ever says it in the entire film. So we can also just get that out of the way. But I had to look that up, a lot of the stuff. So, but I thought that it was an instance where she sort of like pushed her down. I think they got in like a fight and she just overreacted where she was pushed down, and then it wasn't like a play fight. I think it was like she just, had an emotional moment, grabbed a rock, chucked it at her. Kind of one of those things, where you push someone off a bridge or you stab them with a knife and then it's like, oh shit, what did I do?
Things.
Right? I got caught up in the moment, right?
Just one of those things.
We've all done that before, right?
Happens all the time. I call it Tuesday.
Blade slipped, fell into the guy's abdomen. It's not my fault. What do you want?
If I had $1.
So, Now, here's the other thing, too, is because there's no dialogue, the film is forced to, I think, drag out what's there. Like, there's a lot of moments where it's like, we really don't need an additional 10 seconds of her walking around here. Like, we don't need to see the entire couch move from like one position to the other. But you get the sense they're like, we're a little short on time, so we got to draw some of these things out.
Yes.
And so some of that kind of worked against it. And also, so like, I was trying to think of how to put this, but like, you know how like in Tom Cruise movies, the criticism is like Tom Cruise is always running from one place to another, right?
Okay.
This is like Caitlin Dever is the Tom Cruise of walking. I feel like this entire movie is she walks from one area to another. She walks upstairs, she walks downstairs, she walks to the post office, she walks back. She walks to the bus, she walks back home. She leaves to her friend's house, she walks back home. Like over half this movie is just her walking places because it's like, well, we can't have them talk and we can't have her stand there. So another journey, another small hike. I don't know. Right. And again, like that's where I feel like the conceit of like, so just to contrast real quick, right? Like I forget if you ended up watching it, but I know I did a review for the audio podcast some time ago on the show Primal that you actually recommended to me. Did you ever go back and watch that?
I did.
Yeah. So like that's an example where there's virtually no dialogue in the entire thing, except for the final episode slightly. And all of that worked for me, dude. Like that is to date still one of the most emotional series that I've ever experienced without them uttering a single word, right?
Yes.
So I know that this can be done well. And perhaps I'm colored by that experience, but as I watch this, I don't get that same stuff, like I don't. And part of it is Caitlin Dever is, I think, let's talk about performances, which is really, it's the Caitlin Dever show. She's asked to carry 87 minutes of screen time in an 89-minute film, right? Like,
she does not have an empathetic T-Rex, if that's what you're saying. No.
Yeah, and that's a tough thing to have her do.
It is.
Without,
I think she did a great job considering the burden she was bearing here.
I mean, she was up to the challenge and she took it on, but at the same time, like, I wouldn't say it was a great performance. I would say it was serviceable. And that's kind of I felt like that was my experience with this whole film as I kept waiting.
See, I thought it was a great performance. I really
do.
Genuinely. Yes.
Okay. That's good. I didn't, I thought that a lot of it felt, I know this is kind of can be something of a tired criticism sometimes, but it's like where just the whole thing kind of feels like a performance a little bit,
Yes.
And I think part of that, as I was breaking it down, is there are many character incongruences that I think end up not working for her. So, like, for example, if somebody's going to be that agoraphobic or people averse to the point where they're going to have a panic attack delivering a mailbox. Like, I don't think that person actually goes through and like tries to wave at people, for example, right? Like, I would have liked to have seen more consistency where she practices the waving and the smiling, and then like that person in real life, when that moment comes, like they don't go through with it, right? Like they try, but they fail and they move on. And there was just like, and then the whole thing with the dance that she does at the beginning, like that really felt like that was not an organic character anything. It felt like something the screenwriter reverse engineered, like, oh, I want to have this final scene where everyone is dancing, so at the beginning I'm gonna have her do this random old school dance. And so because of the lack of motivation for these things, it felt like I know I've brought this up before on the podcast, but it was our old screenwriting teacher Bennett. Ryan and I went to film school together. For anyone watching that doesn't know, that's how we met. And so he told us that one of his least favorite aspects of the movie's Monsters Ball, which had gotten a ton of attention at the time, was the plastic spoon that Billy Bob Thornton's character brings with him. And it's because instead of being organic to like Jack Nicholson's character, it was just something that the writer put in there, ham-fistedly, as we like to say, because it's like, oh, I'm going to, be deep and have this guy carry a plastic spoon. And it's like, no, if you don't relate it to anything else, then it's like a douchey move because you're just putting things in there indiscriminately without having them relate to anything larger.
Right.
And so that's how I felt about the dance sequence. Even though you can say it creates an organic bookend stylistically, thematically it means nothing. If it does and I missed something, you can let me know right now. I obviously missed other things in this film, but I don't remember dance, like even just simply like, oh, that was the dance that her and her best friend did all the time together, right? Like would give it some sort of something behind it, but I didn't catch that if that was there.
So it's my understanding that, okay, so first off, I think that all of this gets lost in the no dialogue thing because, again, none of this gets explained.
Yeah.
But it's my takeaway, and some of this I've derived from watching interviews with the director and doing some research behind the scenes, but it's my understanding that she is hiding away and being agoraphobic, and all of the anxiety that she has held is because she is shunned by this town, because she has killed her friend, got off pretty much scot-free with no jail time. And so that's why when she goes into town, everybody's like looking at her with disgust. She gets spit on by the mom. And so she is craving acceptance. And so when she does the dance in the beginning, that's her trying to have fun by herself. She has now been shunned by this town and pushed to the outskirts and is left to her own devices, maybe going a little nutty. She's writing letters to her best friend. She's lonely. And so she's trying to find comfort in letters to her dead best friend, dancing with herself, anything she could do to try to feel like a part of society, even though she is removed from it. So it's not that she is timid and mousy. She is literally has been expelled from society for the sins that she has done. So that's kind of my takeaway on that. Going another layer, I will say that Brian Duffield has gone on the record to say that he did not set out to make a movie with no dialogue. This wasn't some weird social experiment or cinematic experiment. He was literally writing the movie, and because she's out in the hills or whatever, all by herself, he got to a certain point where she gets to town, and she hasn't talked yet. There was no dialogue, and he felt like it would have felt really weird if you would have gone through literally half the film, including an alien invasion, and then all of a sudden everybody started talking out of nowhere. It felt really out of place. And so he said he just kind of went with it and said, he really leaned heavily on Deaver's performance, and he felt like the whole thing was just a cat and mouse game with these aliens, and trying to run away and hide and attack and all of that. You can't communicate with the aliens. It would have been nice to have her scream a little bit, or, fuck you, or something like that, get away from her, you bitch, one of those type Ripley moments. I did think that this was kind of like a poor man's Alien in that way, where you had Ripley hiding around the ship and, the alien stalking her and stuff like that. Thought it was a very weird choice to show the aliens as much as they did.
And as early as they did. Like, they did not draw that reveal at all. It's like 10 minutes and they're like, hey, here you go, guys. I was like, wow, that is really early.
So just, kind of put a button on that. He didn't set out to make a silent film. It just kind of came out that way because of the nature of her loneliness and isolation. And then also, but then, that does come with its own encumbrances and flaws and challenges. And I think we're discussing some of those here right now. But also I think that's, it's just to clear up, I think that she's totally capable as a person. She's just been shunned from society and isolated for so long that she's become super introverted and doesn't want to be. So the dance by herself is an extension of all of that. And then at the very end, it's the other bookend of that, where she finally, after all this time, now has people she can be with, that accept her for who she is.
It's more about the people who are participating with her.
She gets that connection, even though it's the end of the world and she's connecting with these crazy aliens. So, it's kind of the Twilight Zone-y play, poor man's Jordan Peele payoff. And I really dug the payoff, actually. I really liked the end.
I did like that too. Anytime a film is willing to take a chance and give you the unhappy ending, and especially I think, it's when an ending is done the way this is, and again, there are certain things that I'll give it credit for. Like, I didn't hate this movie. I just didn't like it nearly as much as anyone else. But one of the things that I love that it does is every now and then filmmakers find a way to sort of give you a happy and unhappy ending at the same time, right? Sure. And not every story necessarily lends itself to that either. But when you're sort of in these like metaphysical realms, you can do certain things that other genres don't allow you to do. So you can do something like this where you have, it ends on a down note. Like the subtext behind what we're watching is that she becomes absorbed or indoctrinated, or whatever the correct word is, as part of this alien species, the same as everyone else. But in doing that, she is now part of this hive mind, right? And so she's part of something larger than herself and interacting with people. So, you get both ends, and I do appreciate that about this. And I will say that there were a lot of the no dialogue sequences that worked. The house invasion scene at the top, which I thought was going to go on for much longer, just because the only thing I had heard about it is there was some home invasion elements. So I thought that, maybe this is going to be like, we're going to spend the whole movie in the house. We don't.
That's what I thought.
But
yeah.
Because it's introduced so early, I thought it was just going to be that. But then, it's over about 5 or 10 minutes later. But that whole sequence was done really well, with the way that we just see the shadow of the alien when it first comes, and the sound design, and you hear it sort of running across, and you see the silhouette running across the windows as she's watching from the top of the staircase, and then it runs back very quickly. And just the way all of that was handled was great. But then also, again, these inconsistencies that pop up, the nature of the aliens, which comes to light later, because ultimately they're trying to make her part of it. But it's like, at first it seems like they're there to attack her, but then they're not. And then, they have these mental powers, so like they can pretty much stop her from doing whatever. So if they have these mental powers, how does she kill 3 of them?
Right.
When they've already
I was wondering that too.
Thrown all the knives with their mind and stuff like that. So again, like, if these are small decisions, but they really add up. It's like, I'm not going to say it's like death by 1,000 cuts, but it's like, it's less than it could be by, several dozen cuts or something. And it's unfortunate because I do think, and let's also, I don't think we really touched on the camera work here as well, because I was really surprised to know that it was done by Aaron Morton. We've talked about him with regards to shooting Evil Dead. He did a project, American Gods, which I thought was fantastic. One of the most beautiful pilots that I've ever seen in my life. And I was kind of disappointed in the camera work. Now, I know that you did a little bit more research on this topic and found that I guess this was shot during COVID. There were a number of instances where people were having to come off set. I believe you said the cameraman got COVID himself. And so there was like a certain...
Morton got COVID, probably, day 0. Like walking into set, like they were getting ready to shoot tomorrow. And he was like, oh, by the way. So they had to, on the fly, figure out how to isolate him. And they put him in a Sprinter van, and he was like directing by monitor and walkie-talkie, on set, and had, his second unit and his AC and stuff like that do a lot of the camera work. So the exteriors were shot in Slidell, Louisiana, right outside of New Orleans. And then the interiors, because of the nature of all the crane shots and stuff like that, a lot of great crane work and jib shots and Steadicam work. If you pay attention, there's a buttload of motion. That camera is moving around the house constantly. When you're saying, she's walking here and walking there, that camera is following her. And there's a lot of really cool cinematography. And then the way they interacted and played with the lighting, and had, because they had all these cranes with just lights on them that they were flying around the house set. to mimic all of the lighting that was coming from the flying saucers and the alien creatures, is to kind of build up some of that anxiety and stuff like that. So it was a bit of a ballet or a dance, if you will, between the camera and the lighting, because the lighting was moving as well. And then they would use anamorphic lenses, which create that blue lens flare that we know from all the J.J. Abrams movies. And that was also to signify danger. That's how I immediately could tell when that little briny creature crawled in her mouth, and then all of a sudden she was instantly taken to paradise and everything was fun and she was having a good time. But the blue anamorphic lens flares kept showing up, and I was like, that she's in it. Like, that thing took her brain over, because we're still in alien land. Let me ask you real quick, because before we go too long and turn this into a full length hour and a half episode, did the alien creatures work for you being the Greys? Or would you have rathered something more xenomorphic or something more original, like The Mist or something like that? Were you cool with it just being some gray-ass 1980s style aliens?
I mean, I didn't know it was 80s. It's more like 1950s style aliens, right? Like, you got some like Mars Attacks, like kind of things going on, right? But you know what? I did, because I do kind of appreciate old school sci-fi, and I kind of dig. You know what? I don't know if you played the game. I don't know if you've ever played like the XCOM games, but it reminded me a lot of the aliens from the XCOM games, which again, just little green or little gray men, right? And I think, again, that's cool. I didn't have a problem with that. Like, you could argue it's perhaps a little unimaginative, but so are vampires or werewolves or anything else. And this is just another one of those pre-established creatures. And like, look, some of these work, which is why they stick around, and I think little green men work. And so, no, I didn't have a problem with that. I dig flying saucers. I loved the tractor beams. I loved all of the stuff that they did with that. I'm a sucker for colored lights and being able to flash those around, Close Encounters style. Like, yeah, all that stuff was cool for me. But it's like, you could tell that that's what they were digging too, because then again, to my point earlier, I don't know if this was like, because, the dude was sick and so other people were filling in, but like when they would go back to like the exteriors during the day, when she was just walking around, like everything was so drab and so just like monotone. And even just the way that like she's shot, because she's a very attractive young woman, but I feel like they didn't do her any favors. It felt like they were like, oh, we want to go natural lighting. And again, it was almost that thing like of that steadfast commitment to doing natural lighting. Like, I thought that if they could have augmented it with, I literally feel like some shots they didn't even bother like taking a bounce board out, to balance it out. They're just like, it's fine. And that brings me to another point real quick, by the way, too, which is like, this film is one of the films in recent memory I can think of where it's like, when it was working, it was fine. But like the moment it would stop, I would be like, I'm bored. Like it was weird. There was like no like, oh, I'm going to carry this excitement from this scene over a few minutes. Okay. It was just like the moment like the scene would turn off, I would be like instantly bored again. And then like some aliens would show up and I'd be like, oh, cool, I'm kind of into this again. And then the minute they would shut off and be like, and I'm back to not caring about the film, which I would have to mean, it means that like I would have to think that means I didn't really respond to her character and her plight and all of that stuff. And again, this goes
especially
back to,
for it being a 90-minute film. Like, I would expect that from like a 2.5-hour version of this. So this is my take on this film. I think this film would have been a great 1-hour episode of like Black Mirror or Twilight Zone by Jordan Peele or something like that. I think that if you would have just trimmed out a lot of the backstory and tried to sum up that backstory somehow and like put a bow on that a little quicker, instead of like starting out with so much like, I miss you, writing the letter. There was like so much that stretched it out to an hour and a half that I think you could have condensed that, just gotten to sad, lonely girl gets visited by aliens, fights back. And then also the amount of aliens that keep coming back. One of the challenges Brian Duffield expressed is that I guess it was really hard to keep her from, and it seems like that, you kind of felt this way. You're saying this in other words, is that they had a hard time from keeping her Bryn character from feeling like a rag doll. Like they were just, we're going to beat up on her here and then fling her over there and then beat up on her over here and not letting her do anything. He said that for this to be a successful movie to him, he wanted her character to be able to, if you removed the aliens, you could have seen that side of the plot through in like an A24 drama. You could have put her character in another situation and still had it be interesting. And it sounds like you're saying on that level, it failed. But on the alien level, it was successful when she was like running around doing alien stuff. But with the exception of some of the repetition or the godlike powers the aliens had that were inconsistent, I did feel like I agreed with you. I think that maybe the end boss alien could have had maybe some of those powers, and then maybe she built up to that video game style. But it seems like they all had that, flick of the finger and shit. They could move shit and, they were busting down the couch. It did address that they were formidable foes from Get, which helps the anxiety factor for me. Like I was getting heart palpitations from the moment those aliens were coming through, because they were like boss battle from day one. Like they were just like flinging doors open, moving their fingers. Shit was moving in the house, busting walls, throwing her through walls. But then they would stop doing that, and then she would have plenty of time to throw like a trophy through their head. So it's like, to your point, it did seem a little inconsistent on their powers, but, overall, I did like this. It's not perfect. I do think it would have been better as like an hour and a half. I've kind of felt the same way about 10 Cloverfield Lane. I really love that movie too. I really enjoyed that, but I do think that the ending is the cool payoff, and all the anxiety stuff in the bunker is cool, but I think that went on just a tad bit too long as well. It maybe would have played better as like an hour long sci-fi episode on one of these series.
Yeah, maybe. And I will say, for what it's worth, I did want to like this movie. I liked the conceit of it. I appreciate films that are artsy. I like sci-fi horror films. And honestly, the guy Brian Duffield seems like a pretty cool guy. Like, seems like a dope guy.
People seem to love him. Yeah.
Grab a beer with. I just feel like after my review, he's not going to want to grab a beer with me, maybe. But hey.
I'll have a beer with you, Brian. Be right.
I appreciate it.
Oh, Duffy.
You'll have a beer with him. You'll leave me on the corner. I thought you were saying you'd have a beer with me, but no. You and Brian go off and have a fine time.
Yeah, B-Dog. What's up, B-Dog? Let's go have some beers. Real quick, just a couple last little nuggets of info I was able to gather along the way. It's worth noting that B-Dog is very well received in the indie film community, and he was able to get the sound design team from The Batman to come in. I thought the sound design ripped. I thought that helped a lot in a movie with no dialogue. You have to imagine that the music and the sound design is very important to build the tension, release that tension, and build it back up again. They kind of had their hands full. So, he got the award-winning sound design team from The Batman. And then he got Joe Trapanese, if I'm saying his name right, who did the score to Tron Legacy with Daft Punk and Oblivion, among other movies. So because they're, I guess, homies from way back, Joe agreed to score this film in advance. So with there being no dialogue, it was able to give Miss Deaver an opportunity for to get the feel for the tone and the vibes of what this movie was supposed to be. So he laid down a bunch of sample tracks that were used in the film, and then he kind of built them out and fleshed them out from there. So in a movie without any dialogue, I thought that it was very successful from an audio standpoint. And there was a lot of stuff happening in the surround sound speakers behind you and stuff like that. It was very creepy. So, anyways.
Nice. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this review here. Before we do, just want to remind you, our audience, to go ahead and like this video, subscribe to our channel, and then let us know what you thought about the film or any aspect of our review. Drop it in the comments below. We would love to hear from you guys. We finish up all of our reviews with a little feature called 3 Adjectives. Just like it sounds, we just give our 3 adjectives that basically summarize how we felt about the film. For mine, I'm not going to go into any detail. They speak for themselves, but I'm going to go with plotting. I guess I'll go into a little detail and say that I found the film just generally plotting, as well as the main character's journey a little bit plotting. Inconsistent for a lot of the reasons that I discussed over the course of the film. Some stuff to like, some stuff not to. And very simply, meh. I know you loved it, but for me, it was a meh kind of film. And that's, no disrespect to anyone involved. It does feel like everybody tried their hearts out. Just not everything worked for me because of that hat on a hat thing that I was talking about. So what you got, buddy?
I'm going with anxiety. I thought it worked very well in those moments. Built tension pretty good. I would agree with you. Some of the backstory stuff seemed a little extraneous or didn't really work, or was just downright confusing. until you get to the very end, which is a shitty way to go through a movie, scratching your head, wondering what is going on until this, final resolve. And you're like, oh, okay. The next one is Ballin' on a Budget, because I thought for as small as a film as this is, I thought it did really well with the alien work and the camera work and all the things. Had some, pretty good cheats with the visual effects, with the lighting going around the house and stuff. I thought they found some really cool outside ways. Even though they did show you the aliens, I thought even when they weren't on screen, there were moments that really felt tense without showing you. So Ballin' on a Budget. And then my last one is The Big Payback, to quote James Brown, because I love the ending. I thought that was such a cool moment. And then when she comes all the way up the camera in a little dance and then smiles and waves at the audience, I thought that was really fun. So The Big Payback, Anxiety, and Ballin' on a Budget. Jason, what are we scoring this bitch?
Well, I do generally like to go out on a high note, so I'll go ahead and get mine out of the way. If I'm being honest, this is a 2 3/4 star movie for me.
Damn.
Again, for all the reasons that I outlined. And it's a movie, it reminded me in many ways of another Hulu movie that I watched a year or two ago that was a similar exclusive called Come True. And in that film, I had a similar response where it's like, I really like what this film's about. I like the aesthetic. I like the general vibe. These pieces and this particular stew didn't work for me, but I would absolutely come back to this restaurant and try something else you made in the future. Right? I do feel like there's like a lot of what was there. I've said this before, right? It's like, how there's those certain bands where, you like these 6 bands and everyone in the world who likes these 6 bands likes the 7th band. Except for you don't like the 7th band and nobody else can figure out why you don't like the 7th band. And you're like,
sure.
I don't know what to tell you, right? Like, I love all of this music. I just don't love this one version of it. Kind of how I felt about this film. But what about you, buddy? Let's go ahead.
Dude, I am giving this movie 4 stars.
Wow, nice. Awesome.
Yeah. I had a lot of fun.
That's about where I thought. Yeah, that's totally
I had a lot
fair,
of fun.
Given everything that
it's
you
not perfect.
About, so. And it seems like flaws. A lot of, I understand I'm in the minority. It sounds like a lot of people will agree with you over me very quickly. So, but that's what's awesome about film, right? Is you get to watch it and decide for yourself. So
I do think real quick, just to wrap this up, I think that maybe I'm excusing a little bit of this because of its genre. I think that sometimes when you watch sci-fi or horror, maybe this is not a movie, and we've had these come up many times on this show, that it's like, maybe this doesn't lend itself well to be picked apart in a film discussion podcast. Maybe it's better just watched and enjoyed with some popcorn and say, well, that was fun. And then you go about your night, and that's the end of that. You don't need to talk about it and pick it apart because it falls apart very quickly when you do. When you're taking notes on Friday the 13th, 8, it's like, whoa, he's in New York now. How do you get to New York? What does he drive a car? Would he take a plane? A bus? What's up? You just got to overlook some of these things and just go along. I think that this is one of those films. So I had fun.
But by the way, also a really strong illustration that we're seeing firsthand of why there can so often be a discord between critical and audience responses to films, right? So often the audience say, those critics don't know anything. It was a great time. But yeah, it's because you weren't sitting there with a pen and paper and you didn't have to dissect the film and talk about it for however much time afterwards, right? Because if you did, you would have a totally different experience because you realize, like, I have nothing to talk about here. There must not be too much here, right? So, yeah. But, for everyone watching, obviously, the two of us disagree. Would love to know what you guys thought, right? I think most of you will be on Team Ryan. Maybe a couple of you out there will be Team Jason. I could use a little love from what I understand. But
get in those comments, baby.
Either way, as Ryan likes to say, 90 minutes, in and out, baby. Not too much of your time.
Easy
so
peasy.
Go ahead and check it out. It's on Hulu right now. And also be sure to visit esotericacinema.com for some additional content out there. For Esoterica Cinema, I am Jason Peters. He is Ryan Siebold. We are asking you to enjoy the movies.